and welcome to this Astranti video where we will be going through how to approach ethical issues. Now, ethics is really important for you as a CIMA student, so it's important that you know how to deal with issues if they come up. Okay, so what we're going to go through is a number of steps, again outlined in the CIMA Ethical Code, for dealing with identified issues. So what you should do if you think something might be unethical. The first question to ask yourself is there a threat? Can you identify a threat? Perhaps one of the 5 threats identified in the CIMA code. Okay, self-interest, self-review, intimidation, familiarity, and advocacy threats. Are any of those in play? And you may even go further than that. You may see other types of threats. So if you can identify a threat, then you need to determine whether the threat is acceptable. So that example I gave earlier on, perhaps your boss is pushing you to hit a certain deadline and really it's not a significant threat. You should be able to hit that deadline if you kind of get your head down and do the work. But if they're pushing you to hit a deadline that is literally impossible, there's not enough time for you to get it done, then maybe there is a significant threat there. Now, if you've identified a threat and determined that it is not acceptable, then you need to see if you can apply any safeguards. Again, the safeguards outlined in the CIMA code. But you may not be in a position to apply any safeguards at this stage. So the next step for you will be to discuss the issue with a supervisor to see if you can resolve the issue. Okay, we already sort of covered some of these steps earlier on. And if you go to your supervisor and you're unable to resolve the issue, then again, you need to go to a higher authority within the company to try and resolve the issue. And again, this doesn't always work. It might be the company has a particular culture and you can't resolve the issue inside the company. So at that stage, you need to look externally and try to apply further safeguards if possible to ensure compliance, because you've run out of options with regards to talking to people internally within the company. And if you can't apply any safeguards still, then your only option really is to eliminate your exposure as far as possible. And at that stage, you would consider contacting relevant authorities and regulatory bodies. So what we're going to do is take this flowchart and apply it to a real life scenario, the kind of scenario that hopefully not, but potentially you may find yourself in one day. So in this example, we have our accountant, Idris. And Idris works for a telecommunications company in the accounting department. And alongside Idris, we have Atmal. And Atmal is senior to Idris. He's higher up within the corporation, but he's only 1 or 2 levels above Idris. He's not all the way up there with the senior managers or the directors. And Atmal is a very popular guy around the office. He's very charismatic and a lot of people like him. But unfortunately, Idris has discovered that Atmal has been misclassifying revenue expenditure as capital expenditure. Okay, so put yourself in Idris's position and we're going to work out what we would do if we were in this particular scenario. So let's refer back to our decision-making steps. So the first step then is to figure out whether or not there is a threat in this situation. Is there a threat to one of the key ethical principles? Okay, well in this case, there is a threat because Atmal is misclassifying revenue expenditure as capital expenditure. That is knowingly misrepresenting financial information. And as we know, that goes against the principles of integrity and objectivity. And so the threats here are a self-interest threat, potentially, because Atmal is doing it to earn more money, to potentially improve his position, to move his way up the company by producing favorable reports. And it could be out of intimidation. It could be that someone higher up in the company is putting pressure on Atmal to do this kind of thing, or it might just be inherent in the culture of the company. But either way, whatever it is, there is certainly a threat that can be identified, and we can specifically identify the threats and the key ethical principles that are at stake here.
So now we need to determine whether the threat is acceptable. And in this case, we've sort of already answered this question. It's not acceptable because the threat we've identified goes against integrity, objectivity, and it's certainly either self-interest or intimidation threat that is in place, and that is not acceptable. Okay, and specifically relating to section 240, we can say that it is knowingly misrepresenting financial information and producing materially false and misleading entries. So there is a threat and it is not acceptable. So we need to move on to the next question, which is, can any safeguards be applied? Well, unfortunately for Idris in this situation, he's really too low down in the company. He doesn't have the authority or power to put any safeguards into place. So there's nothing he can do at this stage other than to go on to the next step, which is to discuss with his supervisor to see if he can resolve the issue. Now, the problem is that his supervisor in this case is Atmal. And so when he goes to Atmal and brings up the issue, Atmal is not willing to hear it from a subordinate that he's not doing his job properly. And so, of course, the issue will not be resolved. Atmal says, no, look, I've been here longer than you. I know what I'm doing. Don't worry about it. Just pretend it didn't happen. And so Idris goes on to the next stage and thinks, okay, I didn't manage to solve this with Atmal, and I'm going to have to go higher up here. I'm going to have to speak to a more senior manager to see if I can resolve the issue. So he goes to a more senior manager, perhaps the finance manager or someone higher up, and says, look, I've found these issues. We've got misclassification of revenue expenditure as capital expenditure. I think it's an ethical issue. I think this particular principle is at threat. And the finance manager looks at Idris and says, look, Atmal's a good guy. He's been doing good work for the company for years. Why don't you just look the other way on this one? I think we're going to be okay. So you haven't still been able to resolve, or Idris hasn't been able to resolve the issue with the higher authority. Okay, so the next question for Idris is, can further safeguards ensure compliance? So he has a look through the company's policies to see if there is anything he can appeal to there. Unfortunately, he can't find any particular policy that prohibits this particular behavior. Okay, so he decides to look outside of the company and he finds that there is an external regulatory body, the regulatory body for telecommunications, that he can appeal to. And luckily that resolves the issue. He goes to the regulatory body and they step in and they investigate the issue. And in the end, Atmal is arrested and Idris's manager is fired because it's considered a serious enough offence. So did Idris do the right thing here? Well, he followed the flowchart and he did everything according to the book. So he certainly did do the right thing. And if we look at the outcome, Atmal was arrested. It means that whatever it was he was doing was obviously material and significant enough that it was considered to be criminal activity. And he was arrested, presumably for fraud or something like that. Now, if Idris hadn't said anything and had done as he was told, or had gone along with it, or had signed off the report knowing that it had material misstatements in it, and he hadn't followed this process, then it's possible that Idris would also be in a prison cell alongside Atmal because he didn't do his job in uncovering unethical behavior.
So if you found that video useful, we have many more videos like that one on our YouTube channel. So give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want access to more of that content. We are also around in other places on social media. We have an Instagram page. We are available on Twitter, and we have a number of Facebook groups related to which particular level you are at. So if you're an operational student, have a look for our operational group where you'll find useful content there. And of course, you can find us at our website, www.astranti.com, where you can get access to many free materials.